Since I began driving about 23 years ago, I have owned 66 cars. And 8 years ago, when we created the VINwiki app, some friends and I thought one of the most interesting use cases was something that I'd already been doing in tracking where some of your cars ended up after you sold them. We're pretty good at understanding where our cars came from, what the history is before that, getting them checked out, and then obviously documenting our ownership. But seeing beyond that, what happens down the road, to me, has always been very fascinating. And so today, I wanted to do a video covering where all 66 of those cars have ended up. And I'm going to start with the cars that I had to sell to buy the Bugatti, or to cover the down payment to buy the Bugatti with a giant loan from Premier Financial Services. And that is 7 different cars. Now, the first 3 I sold about a year ago, right at the end of 2023, on Sotheby's Motorsports, or SOMO. And SOMO is actually the sponsor of this video and a lot of content this year on VINwiki. And they're one of the fastest growing online marketplaces for collector cars and exotic cars. And I use their auctions to sell off my 2017 Ferrari GTC4 Lusso, my 1976 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow that we'd run the US Express New York to LA in, and my 6-wheeled Range Rover from CarTrek 10. And the experience for me was perfect. They helped me with onboarding the cars, getting them into the system, making sure the listings all looked good. And then throughout the auction, they talked to all the bidders, tried to get them up, know exactly what they could be willing to spend, and hopefully achieve the best possible outcomes. And I was very, very pleased. So let's start with the Lusso. I sold it to a guy that I'd run Gold Rush Rally with a couple of times. He lives up in North Carolina, and he is actually in the process of trying to sell that car soon because his custom spec Ferrari 296, similar to the one that I just drove with Extreme Experience, just came in, and he is over the moon with that car. And so I guess there's only room for one Ferrari in the garage. And so if there's a listing for that, I'll be sure to put it in the description. The 1976 Rolls-Royce wound up in South Florida. I think it's in Jupiter, in a collection of much more modern Rolls-Royces. This was their first early car, and I was told they were going to paint it pink, redo the interior, do all that. Last I heard, they were just driving it around and enjoying it. I really liked that car a lot, and it didn't break in any catastrophic ways for me. I know it hasn't for them yet either, which is always a plus. Now, the 6-wheeled Range Rover, originally when I had bought it, kind of leading up to the prep for CarTrek 10, John Ficarra had wanted to buy me out of it, but then he ended up buying this Mercy and other things that were going on, and so he was not able to. But finally, when we were running the auction, he was the high bidder, and he won the 6-wheeled Rover. So his plan, I guess, is to LS swap it, give it the power that it deserves, turn it into a proper 6-wheel propelled 6-wheeled vehicle, and bring it back for me to experience, and hopefully, I guess, fall in love with it for a first time. Now, the other cars that I sold were the blue manual LP640 that I had acquired the year prior. It was a really, really great car. I didn't really mean to buy it, and so I needed to move it all along, and especially as I started to set my sights on a Bugatti. So I sold it to Ryan Friedman Motor Cars, and then he sold it actually through Vance Stepp, who's been here to tell stories, to a new owner in West Texas. It started to pop up. I've seen posts on the VINwiki app, and so that's really cool to see that it's now in an enthusiast's hands, that they will continue to enjoy it. The other 3 cars that left for the Bugatti purchase were the other 3 Cayennes. So I have built 5 Cayennes with the help of 380 Industries here and Sway, what partially for our Alaskan expedition, the Christopher Michaels Southwestern expedition with JR Garage, and then some development stuff and things like that. So 21, which was the CarTrek 6 car, is with David Lockhart. He's been here to tell stories. He drives it all over the place. He's made it so much better than it was back then, and it was already awesome. Number 22 was the first of the kind of 3 2015 Cayenne turbos. We tested out a lot of different things with tires and wheels and suspensions and racks and lights and things like that. That car is still in Montana, purchased by some friends of Sway, along with number 25, which was actually a 2013 GTS. It was going to be a scout car for another expedition. And so those 2 are still in the Montana area. I own 23, that's the one that I retain, and 24 is also purchased by John Ficarra. And so that's kind of his new daily driver. That's my daily use car anytime I need a back seat. And I got to say, it is the ultimate daily use vehicle. Now, in talking about Cayenne 21 and the 6-wheeled Rover, let's run through the CarTrek cars. The first one was the 2006 flood-titled Gallardo. I actually sold it very recently to a local guy who'd been looking for kind of a cheaper entry-level manual transmission Gallardo, partially to clear some space in the garage, significantly to pay the bill at DC Motor Works for reconditioning the 3 V12 Lamborghinis. And so it is still in the area. I do have first right of refusal, but he is loving it. He's had it at the track, doing a whole lot of fun things in the flood Gallardo. Number 2 would be the Vanquish, that was owned by Freddie, now is owned by Tyler Hoover. He seems to love it, and apparently it hasn't given him many problems. Number 3 was Mona the Maserati from our first Car Trek Christmas special. That car has been sold. We sold them all as a package to a wrecking yard. They parted some things out, and I believe it has been crushed. Number 4 was the Car Trek 599. I sold that to a local guy. He's put about 25,000 miles on it. He thinks, because he still hasn't fixed the screen that shows the mileage in your fuel. He's run out of gas a few times, but he is loving that car, using the very, very last shred of clutch at this time, I'm told. But amazing. Car Trek 5 was the Mercy, which I still have, the Verde Draco car, but also rebuying our first cars, and mine was a 2001 Audi S4. My original one was a 2000 S4 that I got as I went off to college, really as my second car, because I had the hand-me-down Land Rover first, and I gotta say, I loved both of them. The first one still racks up miles. It's got 200-odd thousand miles. I follow it on Carfax and things like that. I haven't seen a picture of it in quite some time, but I had heard it got totally modified up to RS4 specifications and things like that. And then I sold the Car Trek car to John Ross, and I believe that he has continued to use it. He might have sold it, though. Car Trek 6 was multiple cars. We had Tina, the Patina 996 Aero car with the paint falling off. It's with an owner in Ohio now. We also had the car that I had planned to shoot off a cliff, the 2002 S55 AMG that had a terrible history, but honestly ran quite well. Loved that thing. It is with a guy that works for a Mercedes dealership in Western Florida, and he had fixed up a lot of things and was really, really enjoying it. That all was part of the selling off like 9 cars at a time when I was trying to buy a Chiron development car in 2021 that ended up not working out. Car Trek 7 was the TVR Cerbero, one of the first ones in the country. I loved what the car could have been. Didn't always love what it was, but it has become something great. Cameron and the team at DC Motorworks went through it before I sold the car, and it is now owned by a guy in Florida, and he said, considering selling it. So if you're interested in buying the X Car Trek, much more sorted out now, TVR Cerbero, I'll show you his Instagram. You can contact him there, and he can sell you an amazing and very, very impressive looking car. Car Trek 8 was the Bentley Supersport. Now, I had it with about 180,000 miles. I sold it to a person down in Savannah. They sold it rather quickly. It got unwrapped, but ran through a Mannheim auction, still with the Car Trek and Ticket Clinic and Auto Tempest stickers on the back glass and around the car. I did sell it, popped up somewhere else. It looked so good in that green. I don't know why they did that, but it continues to bounce around, and I guess still hasn't broken down to the point that it cannot be driven. Car Trek 9 was the Audi R8 V10 Plus 2017 car. Arnie and I took it on Gold Rush. We did a lot of things, kind of building it into the ultimate rally car. I ended up trading that car to a Buick dealership in Jackson, Mississippi on the GTC4 Lusso that I sold on Somo. That car was bought and then sold a couple of times through a dealership in South Atlanta. It was ultimately destroyed in an accident, and then the tow yard called me. I made some videos picking it back up, looking it back over, and it was bought by another rebuilding YouTube channel. I haven't seen them make any content really putting it back together. It was very, very far gone. Every panel impacted. Terrible, terrible crash, but thankfully everybody survived. And then Car Trek 10 was the Range Rover. So that runs us through the Car Trek cars. Let's go back. So my first car was a 1995 Land Rover Discovery that my father had bought new when they first started bringing Discoveries into the US. That car I took over with about 150,000 miles. I drove it about 30,000 miles. My mom was driving it, didn't notice that it had overheated, and it exploded. And so that car kind of went away, and I recently discovered, I guess this would have been a year, 18 months ago, that the car was still in the area. Somebody had put a new engine in it, turned it into like an off-road beast of a thing, and it was being driven around, but not in a way that was getting frequent updates to Carfax or anything that I would check. There was nothing in the VINwiki app, but I found out that it had gone back through the shop, a local shop in Atlanta that does a lot of Land Rover repairs, and honestly, it was probably in the back lot there, looking very different than it would have when I owned it, at times when I was having them work on a couple of the Range Rovers that my wife owned and drove. And so I missed that car, at least what I remember it as. You'll always love your first car, so I don't know if I would have tried to buy it back, restore it, or anything like that, but it is now totally parted out, not in a place where it can be reassembled. And then I had the S4, which became the down payment on the Supercar Rentals first car, which was a 2004 Lamborghini Gallardo. I sold that car through Lamborghini Atlanta after I went to work there in 2009. This would have been in 2010. I sold it to someone in Texas, who then sold it to someone in California, and it was exported to Hong Kong in 2015, according to Carfax. I haven't seen anything else. I don't know that we'll ever know where that car ended up, but it was just kind of a standard configuration, E-gear, Giallo Midas over black, normal 04 Gallardo, no transparent engine bonnet, but still, I'd love to know where it ended up. The other car that racked up the most miles for supercar rentals was a 2000 360 Spider. So this was an early federalized gray market 360 Spider with a gated manual transmission, Rosso Corsa over Crema, or the Sabia interior, I think, the light cream interior. And it had about 70,000 miles when I sold it. It popped up on Bring a Trailer, didn't sell. It popped up for sale on eBay and didn't sell. I tried to buy it back a couple times. It was always just a little bit too much money, and I don't know exactly where it is today. We also had a Blue Pozzi 04 360 Modena F1. It gets posted in the VINwiki app fairly often. I believe it is in Texas now. And just a gorgeous car. It's got some modifications to it now. We also had a 2005 Ferrari 612 Scaglietti, Bordeaux Ponte Vecchio, the same color as Mona the Maserati from Car Trek 3. And that car recently popped up and I just missed it. It sold for $38,000 on Copart and was bought by someone in Ukraine. I'm told that it's eventually going to get to Bulgaria. I have gotten in touch with the current owner who doesn't have it yet, and his plan was to kind of recondition the car and flip it. I had sold it through Jim Lyons at Sports Car Company, again, while I was at Lamborghini Atlanta. That car was then sold to a woman who drove it around in Southern California for a long, long time, and ultimately, she claimed, I guess, it was totaled for being vandalized, but still ran. So I don't know the exact condition of the car, but that car had the biggest diminished value settlement ever in the state of Georgia at the time that we had that claim. It was just one of the last cars remaining in the supercar fleet. I'd love to have it back, and I really do love a 612, and so we might have to invent some Car Trek premise to justify another one in the garage, but I would really, really like to have that car back, and we'll see if we can make that happen. We also had a 2001 Ferrari 360 Modena, again an F1 car. This is the one that my wife bought from one of T-Pain's rappers for $31,000, and a great story and a great car. I sold it also to a dealership in Texas, and I don't know, there's been no entries. It hasn't shown up since then. So love to know where that car is at this point. Now, after I'd gotten rid of the supercar rentals fleet, I started eventually being able to buy personal Lamborghinis that began with Kimi's Gallardo. And that car, I have also seen nothing since I sold it. I think I sold it probably in 2012. And then I bought an '08 LP640 Roadster, but there's nothing on Carfax, no VINwiki posts. So if you find a blue Chelum over a Vorio Lilium Gallardo, I would love to know if it's the Kimi car. We obviously know the VIN, it's all in the app, but I don't know. It has not popped up and we don't know. Now the first Mercy was an '08 LP640 Roadster E-Gear, and I loved that car. It was my first kind of real dream car purchase with a gigantic loan attached to it. Drove it a lot, about 10,000 miles in 2 years. I kind of noticed that you just don't drive the Roadsters quite as often because I replaced it with an '07 Rosso Vic coupe that I drove 10,000 miles in a year. I sold it to a guy in Nashville, and then it got sold to a guy in Arizona and got crashed. I believe it's been rebuilt, but I have not seen it finished. The '07 also got crashed, I believe twice. It has been rebuilt. It sits next to a Verde Ithaca Aventador that I sold a couple of times through Lamborghini Atlanta with an owner in Florida, I do believe. And then the third LP640 was the Verde Ithaca manual car. Really the dream spec, the coolest one, far too nice for me, but the one that I kind of identified as I started to learn how rare these were to chase the values upward. That car now sits in a billionaire's car collection in Seattle next to the twin of my Nero Nemesis '09 manual LP640 Roadster that Ralph Lauren ordered 2 of. And so I don't know, that's will always kind of be the one that got away because it's now worth easily $2 million. But I like the one that I got to replace it, which was a Grigio Telesto, the Iranian terrorist drug dealer, stolen, fraudulent, reported everything. That car is now in Oregon. So fairly close to the other one. And he had modified it crazy, wrapped it, done a lot of things. He was talking about putting it back to stock. He's got an '01 Diablo 6-liter car and a bunch of other good stuff as well. After I sold that car, I bought a black manual LP640 that is now painted Verde Draco. I have continued to own that car for 5 years. I do still have the Nero Nemesis LP640 manual Roadster. It's currently on display at the Savoy Auto Museum, and I'll be doing a talk there on January 5th, following taking it, along with some of the other cars that are on display, to Caffeine and Octane, so we'd love to have you out for that. Also in the current fleet, we've obviously got the Bugatti, my 2012 Veyron Grand Sport, red over red. Plenty of history here on that car backwards, and no history that I've sold it because I do still love and enjoy that car. I've got Missy Elliott Spiker C8 Laviolette and the Yakuza Diablo SV. The other cars that I currently have, the CL55 from the Cannonball record and the S55 from the 2904 record at the Miles Through Time Museum in Clarksville. I've also got my wife's GL63 and the Audi RS e-tron GT that she very much has enjoyed, and it's about to be done with its lease. The other one that is driven by my editor has recently failed in a way that required a 35-day repair and almost got it lemon lawed, but got us a bit of a financial concession on the lease, which was a wonderful little twist. And along with Cayenne 23, that rounds out the current fleet. Other cars that left recently were the red Mercy SV that I sold to Sports Car Collection. They ran it on Bring a Trailer. They sold it to Houston Crosta. He sold it to a guy in Utah. The car that I took on trade from them was a yellow 430 Scuderia that I sold to Ferrari of Long Island as I bought the Monterey Blue LP640 at the auction. There are some other daily drivers over the years that I don't talk an awful lot about. I had a 2003 Land Rover Discovery that leaked everything that I had as sort of a daily in the later days of the rental car company. I sold that car to a local dealer. They sold it through an auction to a guy in Miami. He sold it to a guy in Puerto Rico who contacted me finding the VIN on VINwiki and asking me if he could make it stop leaking oil by doing anything other than rebuilding everything. I said, it's a Land Rover. It'll stop leaking when it's empty. After I sold that car, I daily drove an '03 S55 AMG, the cheapest one on earth for a long time, and then somebody took an illegal turn right into my front, totaled that car. It's been rebuilt, popped up for sale at one point. That was the white one. Then I bought a gray, much nicer one with the insurance money, and I was going to try to set the Cannonball record in it, but when I started daily driving Kimmy's Gallardo, I decided it needed to go along. It needed a ton of maintenance, which it eventually got, and I ran into the owner at a Caffeine and Octane Jekyll Island car show years later. He still loves and enjoys that. My wife's had a bunch of daily cars, including an '04 Cayenne S that stayed local for a little while, an '08 HSE Range Rover Big Body, and a 2010 Autobiography, the one that we had the dealer lie to us about the timing chain stretch. That one I sold locally. It started puffing an insane amount of smoke like 6 months later. I don't know if it was ever diagnosed, and I do not know where that ended up. Oh, I did have an '06 V10 M5, an E60 car. I bought it right when we found out we were going to have our first child, and I thought I needed something with a back seat, because at the time I guess I would have still been driving the red LP640 most of the time. I sold that to my younger brother. He had it for a little while. He sold it to a guy in Texas who is friends with Bill Farmer, who's done a lot of videos here. I bought a 2014 Range Rover that I drove from the dealership to Lamborghini Atlanta and then sold to a guy in Russia at a massive profit. I had an '86 944 Turbo. I forgot about that car. I just actually owned it because I had to repossess it after financing it for a friend who had helped me through the days of John Tamarian blowing up my Gallardo's motor. And so owed him some favors, loaned him some money for that car. He never paid me back. Then I got it, and then I sold it to a local friend. We had the 2013 Lamborghini Gallardo LP550-2 Spider that Hannah still owns as the Lambulance. That was the cheap Gallardo. I also had a 2010 backup LP560 Spider e-gear car for Car Trek 1. Sold that one. It got a lot of posts in VINwiki. It got supercharged, wrapped green, a lot of stuff. It is still being driven regularly. The 2009 430 Scuderia that I had, the Grigio Silverstone car that I put tons and tons of miles on, loved that car. It got sold through the local Alfa Romeo dealership, and I do not know where it has ended up. It hasn't been posted other than that it was sold in May of 2024. The '85 4000S Brock Yates Audi, sold that to my teammate from One Lap of America, Josh Pashes. He still has that car and has made it much, much more reliable. The 1995 RS Tribute Porsche 993. I gave that car away when we hit 1 million subscribers. It is now owned in Nashville. He lived in the Pacific Northwest and then moved to Nashville. Young guy, still loves it, still drives it all the time. I could not be any happier. Another cross-country car, I had a '95 Cadillac Fleetwood Limousine. Maybe the only American car that I've owned. And I sold that one in Northern California after John Ficarra, John Harrison, and I finished the 2904 running, the final 2904. I had the '06 Mercy Roadster that I sold to Tyler Hoover, and then Normal Guy Supercar sold it. The SLR sold to Bulgaria. He still has it, loves it, posted a lot on Instagram. The '07 M6 Coupe that was the backup car for Car Trek 2. John Ficarra bought it, ended up selling it. I don't know where it ended up. It was in New York last I'd heard. Then there was also the '02 E46 M3 Coupe from our car flipping contest. I sold that one to a guy in Florida, and it was flooded in one of the hurricanes. The 1997 Diablo VT Roadster that had been stolen and revinned and repainted and all this stuff. I sold that car to Patrick Adair, who's been on the channel many times and has an amazing channel himself. He is totally restoring that car and making it his dream version of a Diablo, and I am so excited to see it. A ton of cars and a ton of fun over all the years, but I figured today would be a good day to bring you up to speed on where they are, or at least where I think they all are. And if you've got any updates on any of them, please let me know. And please download the VINwiki app and make a list of all of your cars so you can do the same thing. Whenever you're curious, you can just go on, see if anybody's posted an update, see who's got it now. And then as you keep notes and do other things, you'll always know what the latest information is about your favorite cars. Today's video is brought to you by Somo. Sotheby's Motorsport is one of the fastest growing online auction marketplaces for collector cars and exotic cars. I've sold several of my personal cars on Somo and had great experiences every time. I sold my GTC4 Lusso, a 1976 Rolls-Royce, and a 6-wheeled Range Rover, and all of the transactions went really smoothly. From submitting the car all the way through the auction to the final bids and everything else that you want, they managed everything to make sure that the auction went as perfectly as it possibly could. They talked to me, they talked to the bidders, and everything worked out wonderfully. I know that you'll love them as well. So whether you're looking to buy a car or sell a car, check them out now at the link in the description below and find your next car on Somo.